I don't ever want to encourage people to chase ketones. Like you don't want to just have the highest blood ketone or the highest breath ketone. I mean, you got to look at the data and see what it's telling you. But when you are in a caloric deficit, when you are trying to cut body fat and lean out, it's normal to see an increase in ketone numbers and a decrease in blood glucose numbers. And when you're seeing those and your protein is adequate, you don't want to be under consuming protein, you don't want to be malnourished. But if you're taking in enough protein and you got enough dietary fat coming in, you're going to be solid from an energy standpoint. And you shouldn't really have to worry about losing any lean mass, especially if it's a relatively short period of time.
Right. Yeah. What does your protein look like? Just not contest prep, just like a good healthy amount of protein to where you're still in ketosis, but you're getting adequate protein.
For me, it's probably between 150 and 200. I feel like half the time Crystal has eaten more protein than me sometimes, So it's not near as much as I used to. I mean, there was a time when I'd eat 300 plus grams of protein a day. And if I didn't have like a protein shake, 20 minutes post workout, I felt everything was just falling off. All my gains were going, but that's just not the case.
Huh. And your fats right now are around what area? I guess what's your goal right now? I'm sorry. Are you maintaining? You're building, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah, so I'm in the building phase. I'll be in a building phase until I do another competition prep, which will probably be whenever I can convince Chris to let me do another one. I don't know, probably be a couple of years before I do one, because I try and take a couple of years off in between shows. So right now my calories are around 3,000, which is on the lower end for me. Like I'm trying to figure out what my lower threshold is for my caloric maintenance. And for me, I can eat between like 3,000. I could probably eat between 2,900 calories and like 3,600 calories. Anything in that window, I'm not really going to gain or lose weight. So I'm trying to figure out what my exact caloric maintenance floor is, which is why I'm on the lower end of that spectrum.
Okay. Are you doing any cardio?
Yeah, I go for a run every single day, but it's nothing crazy. It's like a mile and a half or so. And it's more so just for me to listen to a podcast and get my steps in than it is to actually do strategic cardio.
Yeah. Well, now I can definitely tell that you've read Arnold's book, because he's all about running, and he's like the only bodybuilder that really used running as his staple form of cardio. Most bodybuilders today that I've listened to, that I've studied, have said that running is actually quite catabolic.
You don't want to be running marathons every day if you're trying to be a professional bodybuilder, but you can definitely run and train and moderate the two, and then not like there's a tipping point for sure. Like if you run, a reasonable amount and you train a reasonable amount, you're not really going to see a decrease in one or the other. But if you overdo one or the other, it's going to have an adverse effect on the other. So that's why I think 1 mile, 1.5 miles, 2 miles a day, that's not really going to negatively impact my training at all.
Yeah. So are you paying close attention to like how you feel and your stress hormones and stuff as you're running, and maybe feel like, I feel like there's a lot of cortisol. This is probably going to be catabolic. I better not go for a run. Do you ever factor any of that in?
I haven't skipped a day of running in probably about a year now. So I haven't, I've at least gotten 1.5 miles in pretty much every day for the past year. So I haven't really worried about that. There'll be times where I don't sleep well and I can tell that my, cortisol levels are elevated, in which case I may do like a deload week from training. I'll still train, but it may be just a little lighter intensity.
Yeah.
Robert's like a robot. I've always told him that. I'm like, you're like a robot. You just keep going and going and going. I don't understand it.
Yeah.
It's those keto pricks.
Must be. Okay. So your macros right now are pretty well, is it pretty much the same? So like when you increase your calories for the purpose of building muscle, is that an increase of protein and fat in direct proportion to each other, still the same macros and carbs?
Yeah, for the most part, usually. I mean, for me personally, if I'm between about 77 and my sweet spot's about 78% of my calories come from fat. So if I'm between like 73 and 80, like somewhere in that window, I feel good. If I dip into the 60s, then I definitely feel less sharp. I feel more bloated. I feel just more lethargic. So I try and keep it on the higher end of the 70 mark for sure. Mm-hmm. I don't typically gravitate toward the 80% when I'm in the off season, just simply because I'm eating so much more protein. But yeah, somewhere in that upper 70s, and I'm feeling pretty good.
Okay. In the back of your book, you have all of your, it's not a training book, but you have at least a bit of a training outline that looks like there's a decent amount of training volume, nothing like too crazy, but still enough to where you can go, okay, yeah, this is definitely the way that a bodybuilder would train. Your rep ranges, are they, when I first started doing the keto diet, what I found was anything that requires a lot of glycogen, which is like the 8 to 12 rep range, was a bit of a challenge, but I could do 15 to 20 reps without any problem, because I think you mentioned this in your book too. You don't require the amount of oxygen that you need when as when you have sugar in your diet. So like I'll notice like my heart rate will be up, like my heart's pumping, but I'm not huffing and puffing and out of breath like I am, which is amazing.
Yeah.
So I can do 15 to 20 reps without as much of an issue, which is really helpful on squats, because otherwise I'd just be gassed. And then 3 to 5 reps, I'm actually pretty good too. But like anywhere right in the middle is kind of challenging. I'm wondering if you've experienced any of that, having done bodybuilding both as an athlete with carbs and an athlete without carbs.
So if you've watched and listened to any of our stuff, we're very much so on the, truly allow yourself to deeply adapt and give yourself the time to play the long game and do that. So once you've truly adapted, you're able to replenish glycogen stores just as efficiently as if you were eating carbohydrates. So that said, now that I've been strict keto for 6 years, 5-6 years, I can hit those 8 to 12 rep range. I could do those very glycolytic demanding exercises and activities and run circles around people that are eating carbohydrates. Now, had I constantly been going back and forth, having weekends where I'm binging on carbs and eating keto the rest of the week, and I never really got that level of depth in my adaptation, then I probably couldn't say the same thing. But since that's not been the case, I don't notice any adverse effect with regard to glycolytic demanding activities.
Great. I've experienced the same thing, and I wanted to hear it from you just to make sure that I was on the right track.
Yeah.
Because it was only when I first started that anything glycolytic was a challenge. Particularly HIIT cardio. I used to love jump rope, and I would do jump rope all the time because it burns an insane amount of calories and it jacks my heart rate up. But when I cut carbs for the first time, I just couldn't do it at all. I couldn't do anything explosive. I could go for a run. I could use that because that's a primary fuel source for fat. But I think that, it took my body time to get used to replenishing glycogen stores as efficiently as what you're describing. So,
yeah, Crystal does jump rope. That's pretty much, she does jump rope.
I do it with like a superset. So I might do like for leg day, I will just choose like 5 exercises and I always go super heavy. But in between my sets, I'll do jump rope, which kind of just seems crazy. But I picked it up recently and I love it. And I just I can't get enough of it. But I think with what you were saying is I find that a lot of people get told, oh, you can't do this once you're keto, or, oh, you can't do high volume once you're keto, or whatever it is that they decide you can't do. And then people believe that, and then they prevent themselves from doing it. And for us, we kind of just went for whatever we were in the mood for. And so we've played with it all and found that we haven't had any issues with it, except for maybe during that adaptation period. So,
wow.
Yeah.